Around the world, the coronavirus is spreading faster than ever, setting a record of 5.2 million new cases last week as the global death toll rose past 3 million. In this country, cases are still slowly trending up as a new poll shows fewer Americans are taking precautions against COVID, like social distancing, though calls are growing to end mask wearing in most outdoor settings. And while many are putting their hopes in the country's vaccine rollout, with all adults in the U.S. officially eligible as of yesterday, and more than half of that group now at least partially vaccinated, a recent decision out of the CDC is threatening to slow that progress. The Johnson & Johnson single-shot vaccine has now been on hold for a week in the U.S. over reports blood clots appeared in 6 women who'd recently received the vaccine, one of whom died. While the European Union's Medicines Agency decided today that the benefits of the shot outweigh the risks, the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices has decided to wait for more information before they make the call, which they're not expected to do until this Friday at the earliest. It's a move my next guest called, quote, a deadly mistake in an op-ed he co-wrote in the Washington Post. I'm joined now by Govind Persad. He's an assistant professor at the University of Denver's STRUM College of Law and a faculty scholar in bioethics at the Greenwall Foundation. Govind Persad, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
Why a deadly mistake to extend the stay?
So what we were really concerned about when we wrote the op-ed was, especially after looking at the meeting and seeing the way that some of the state public health officials had raised concerns, the main public health official, Dr. Shah, who represents the Association of State Health Officials, said, look, you have to consider whether even pausing for a week may limit access for some folks in the middle of a pandemic. And our concern, what motivated us to write the op-ed, was a feeling that the decision-making and thinking about, as you just mentioned, risks and benefits, didn't take sufficient account of the fact that a lot of folks might not be able to get access to a different vaccine right away, and pausing in the middle of a pandemic is something that needs to be looked at very seriously given the risks of the COVID-19 virus.
And obviously a single shot is the best way to go with certain people who are hard to find, hard to get back to, unlikely to come for a second shot. So does your reasoning extend to the original stay, even if there is a causal connection between those blood clots and that death and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? That's 1 death out of 7 million administered, as opposed to thousands of deaths we know are happening still every single week from COVID itself. Should there have been a pause even to begin with?
I think the initial pause, it's a tough call. I think the argument for, the first thing I'll say is that I absolutely disagree with the folks who say, you know, they should have just swept it under the rug, not said anything. I think you absolutely have to be transparent with the public. Right. The question is to share the information about a rare potential side effect. Given that it tended to show up about 6 or more days after, did you need to pause access for everyone to do that? I think that's the question that's close. Folks have gone either way on that. But important commentators, Dr. Ashish Jha, the dean at Brown Public Health School, thought the initial pause made sense as a way of getting that information out. But I think we agree with him that regardless of how you go on whether you needed to pause at the start, every day you keep the pause going now that you've shared that information about how to treat the side effect gets harder to defend, because the explanation isn't anymore, look, we need to share this new information about how to treat your patients. It starts to look harder to say that nobody should have access to it.
You know, even if access and availability was dealt with, obviously the other issue we've all been thinking and talking about nonstop is hesitancy. And sort of ironically, hesitancy amongst people of color, particularly black people in this country, is going down. And it's going up amongst white people, particularly Republicans, people who live in counties where Donald Trump won in 2020. Here is Anthony Fauci yesterday on how to deal with hesitancy. Here's Dr. Fauci.
What we say to anyone who has doubts about getting a vaccine, we leave it up to you. Look at the data. The data speak for themselves. We all want normalcy in America. The highway to that normalcy is vaccination.
You know, I generally swear by Fauci, I have to tell you, but not here. There are a lot of public health issues in this country where we mandate that people do certain things for the greater public health good. If you put on your ethical hat and put aside the legal issues, I know it's only emergency use authorization as opposed to full licensure and that sort of thing. Is it not ethically appropriate for either the government itself or individual businesses, individual institutions, to mandate that people under their watch get vaccinated?
I think right now, this is a really important question that a lot of ethical and legal folks have been thinking hard about. I think it depends a lot on what setting you're in. I think the case where mandates seem the most compelling to me right now is where the people that you are coming into contact with don't have a choice about whether they're going to be exposed to risk in doing something. So when you're thinking about folks who are patients in hospitals, folks who are in long-term care facilities, obviously, people who are in prison and are being watched over by guards, maybe in detention facilities, those folks don't have a choice. And so I think there's a compelling case to be made that people who are interacting with them ought to be either vaccinated or have a very good reason not to be vaccinated. And I don't think what we've been talking about now about the Johnson & Johnson pause affects that, because soon, especially with eligibility opening up, there should be an opportunity for everybody to be vaccinated going forward. So once we have the opportunity where really everyone who wants to can be vaccinated, I think you have to start looking initially at where are people coming into contact with high-risk folks who don't have a choice about coming into contact with them. And folks who are coming into contact with those high-risk people, then I think is a strong argument for saying that a mandate makes sense.
One last ethical thing for me. I was stunned when I read your piece. I think you wrote it with Zeke Emanuel, I'm not sure, in the Boston Globe the other day, about our obligation to the world. We talked here with Dr. Curry the other night about the fact that there's something like COVAX has gotten somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 million doses out to 86 countries, obviously fewer than 500,000 per country, which is not even a drop in the bucket. I didn't know till I read your piece. We have 3 million doses of AstraZeneca in warehouses in the United States, and obviously AstraZeneca has not been approved here, that we are keeping here rather than shipping out to poorer nations that have virtually nothing. What is our obligation to other countries in the world that don't have our wealth and access?
I think there are a bunch of things that we could be doing much more of. One is, I think that countries, it's reasonable for them to prioritize vaccinating their own people. But as you say with the AstraZeneca, or I think what we're doing right now with the Johnson & Johnson is very hard to defend in that respect, in that right now we just have a lot of it sitting in freezers. If you look just across the border, just north from where you are, a little further from where I am in Canada, they're dealing with a horrible COVID-19 outbreak. When we say, there are plenty of other vaccines, if we're not going to use that vaccine, we should at least offer them the opportunity. I think since they're already using the mRNA vaccines, we should use the Johnson & Johnson here and share that with people who would otherwise have nothing. But beyond that, just sharing the physical doses, I think there's a really strong argument for us trying to use our resources to help build capacity to manufacture more vaccines abroad. I think that's going to be sort of building up those supply chains, and manufacturing is going to be the way out of this pandemic worldwide. And I'm hoping that, especially as we move past having a supply shortage here, hopefully in the next few months, that we really focus hard on what we can do to improve things for access globally.
I share your hope. Govind Persad, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.